What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed, the panel discussion show. And damn, do we have quite the panel. I should have arranged the panels in logical order, but I didn't. So, it is what it is. So let's go ahead and introduce all of our guests. You recognize all of these guys. They've been here multiple times, and happy to have them all back. First up, Matt Wells, my colleague over at the Body Lock. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Glad to be here with everyone on this fantastic. What day is it? I forget. All these days run together.
I think it's Monday, right?
It's whatever day you want it to be, Matt.
Sure.
Yeah. It's Monday we're recording this. You'll see this on Tuesday. Another colleague over at the Body Lock, Pat Auger, the CEO, the DNA, PIMP. Pat, great to talk to you all the time. We just got finished talking. We'll talk again later tonight, but so let's pretend like we miss each other. How you doing, Pat? As if I didn't know already.
You're doing good, man. It's been forever. It's been a long time. Glad I can be back and done it,
And of course, we've got the man over at Mixed Combat Radio, my good buddy Matthew Hunter, also known as Matt the Lesser. Matt, what's up?
I'm always happy to talk about MMA with Jay and Ben. Now I get Matt the Greater. I get Pat. I get Nick. I'm happy, man. Ant's here, so it's a little bit of a letdown, but I got everyone else I'm excited for, so I'm excited.
I'll be at your house in 10 minutes with brass knuckles. And of course,
we've got quickly. I do miss that Jason's not here. That would have really rounded it out. In terms of
get the hell off my show.
Get Cole on here too. That'd be great.
Yeah, those names are not welcome. Jason Burgos and Cole Shelton are not welcome on this show. I'll have to text them later to tell them I didn't mean that. No, of course. We've got the homie over at The Score. He is known for being Chase Hooper's little brother, Nick Baldwin. Nick, what's going on?
Not much. Fun fact, I am younger than Chase Hooper. I didn't think anybody was younger than Chase Hooper, but I am. So happy to be here and fun. Glad to be here.
And of course, we've got the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy, the senior editor at SureDog. Ben, what's up?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I look around the panel here and I just see a bunch of people that I've been fortunate to meet online and in most cases in person over the last few years. And as we move into the new year, it just kind of makes me take stock of how fortunate I am to do what I do for a living and just some of the incredible minds and personalities that I've met along the way.
Look at that.
And also Ant.
Okay. All right. There we go. That's more like
Matt, you just got to think of Ant on this show as like the body at a wake. You have to have him there, but he doesn't need to contribute anything to the conversation.
Wow. My feelings are genuinely hurt. You are going to be muted now, Ben. And the associate editor of SureDog, the man who anchors the panel every week with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers, Mr. Jay Pettry. Jay, my actual friend who won't say mean things about me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm really happy to see everybody again. I want to let you all know I've been watching this brand new show that just came out. It's called Ozark.
And get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here, Jay. I'm sick of all of you except for Nick. Nick is the only one that I'm not sick of right now.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Well, here's your stat of the week, then we'll get this out of the way. One is your stat of the week. Just one UFC fighter in 2020 got double bonuses from winning their fight. And it's not the one on the shirt either. It's a bigger one because it's a bigger pay. It's an actual paycheck. Justin Gaethje, he got fight of the night and performance of the night for beating down Tony Ferguson and the interim lightweight belt that he totally brought with him. Anyway, yeah, there you go. Double bonuses.
Very, very nice. So before we go into the discussion, something I always forget to do at the top of the show, and that's to tell you to like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Now, let's get into it. So UFC 257, the main event has been set. Obviously, Conor McGregor is making his return against Dustin Poirier in a rematch that I anticipated, I guess. I don't know how much we were begging for this particular fight, but we have it anyway. Michael Chandler will make his UFC debut on the card opposite of Dan Hooker. So looks like this is set up as a clear backup plan in case something were to happen to either McGregor or Poirier. Now that we are in this COVID era, is this a good idea for the UFC to have somewhat of a backup for every main event moving forward for their major cards? Open floor.
I mean, since what year was it when we had like all those cards, all those main events get like replaced?
2018 was the really nasty year.
Yeah, but there's also a year like I think like 2016, 2015 where it got really bad too, and like the progression when the UFC went from 30 cards a year to 50 cards a year to 60 cards a year sometimes, it pushed their labor force, I think, a little bit too much, and that's why we've seen more and more injuries lately. And of course, I think as a backup, they should have other meaningful fights that are relevant for the division under the top billing. That makes perfect sense. Why not? You have also, even though they cut 60 some odd fighters lately, they still have 400 fighters on roster. So you still have the capability to do that. So why not? Makes perfect sense.
I would say the ideal solution would be to have cards strong enough that losing a single fight, even the headliner, doesn't completely scotch them. That may not be realistic if they need to put on as many cards as they do. And that being the case, I don't think it's a good idea to just have an extra contender weigh in as a backup. That's just silly. Like, Kamaru Usman is a huge dude. It takes him a lot of time to get down to 170 pounds. Like to have him do that without even necessarily the expectation of having a fight like they did to him back in 2018, probably not the best use of their resources. I do like when they have multiple high-level matchups in the same weight class on the same card so that moving pieces can at least be slotted into other holes. That phrasing, sorry. If and when somebody does fall off the card.
I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me. I think of it, it was at UFC 161. Anyway, the heavyweight event, the big UFC heavyweight event where they stacked the card with the heavyweight title on the line, and then the main card was all heavyweight affair. Granted, that card took a shellacking, and we had things like Roy Nelson and Bigfoot Silva and Travis Brown fought, I don't know, like a warm body or a sack of potatoes or something, but they had a card and it worked out. It did okay. If the UFC put these cards together to immediately have these kind of implications, they could, without slamming the matchmaking, there have been some pretty suspect matchmaking decisions the past year or so. Now, part of it's COVID, obviously, the not enough bodies and reeling and people that can take it, people that are sick, recovering, et cetera, et cetera. But there needs to be some sort of path forward. And like I think back to the UFC on Fox card where they had Shogun Rua, Brandon Vera, and Lyoto Machida and Ryan Bader. And Dana said, this is a high stakes event. The better winner will get a shot, and they can make matchmaking that way. I think something like that is very important. I think it makes sense. And I think it also helps the promotion, because if you have a card, if UFC 257 lost Conor versus Poirier 2, they don't have a pay-per-view. That's it. There's you can't sell a now increased pay-per-view event because of that. So yeah, I think this should be an almost automatic consideration going forward.
Definitely good points made there. I do want to before Matt, I know you got something to say there. I just want to point out something that Ben mentioned about having people weigh in unnecessarily. There's a reason why Michael Chandler is making his debut on this card and he hadn't made it before, because he was in that same predicament before the Khabib Nurmagomedov and Justin Gaethje fight. All right, floor is yours, Matt.
Allow me to advocate for the devil if I can. I hate this. I hate the idea, right? Because in this sport, every performance means so much, and you only have a finite amount of performances. And I think it's crazy to ask fighters to be ready to face whoever on a day's notice. You got to give these guys the opportunity to train for their specific opponents. And if something happens that fight week, oh, well, you got to reschedule it. I just don't like the idea of, especially when you're talking about championship level, fights, when you're preparing all camp, if you're lucky enough to get a full camp, you have 6 weeks to prepare for, let's say, a striker in Justin Gaethje. He's coming with the leg kicks, he's coming with the wrestling attempts as well, and he's coming with a whole lot of power. And then all of a sudden, okay, he's out, and now you have to fight Khabib. Like, how are you supposed to expect high-level guys to perform at their best when they have an opponent switch up that they haven't particularly trained for with a whole different skill set. So I don't like it. I'm more along with Ben saying stack the cards more, so that way if you lose a fight, you don't have to scramble to find somebody just to fight, just so you can still keep that name on the card.
Yeah. So you're not a big fan of Joe Soto then?
Fuck no.
I mean, it's tough to disagree with anything you said, Matt. I mean, I agree. Like getting Justin Gaethje, I mean, say Justin Gaethje wasn't booked to fight Khabib in October, getting him to fight Khabib on a day's notice is absurd. I mean, why would you agree to that? But as a business practice for the UFC, if fighters are willing to step up, it's great for the UFC because, you know, it's an easy way to save their big fights. And I just don't think putting 2, you know, title fights on a pay-per-view card is realistic, or putting, you know, actually 3 or 4 good fights on a fight night is all that realistic. So I don't know. It's just the way MMA works. I mean, you know, next a couple weeks from now, a day before the fight, before 257, they call Michael Chandler, hey, Poirier is out. You want to fight Conor? Chandler's not saying no. He's taking that fight all day. And that's just how most fighters are. And so I think backup fights make sense. I think having one guy weigh in just to weigh in doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't think stacking cards is going to be happening anymore, just with the ESPN deal and everything. So it's a decent option for the UFC because they don't care about their fighters in the first place.
Now, I want to ask a quick question. I'll probably ask Pat because I don't think he's weighed in on this yet. So 257, Chandler versus Hooker. Obviously, Chandler is the guy who they'll slot in for the Conor Poirier fight. So Dan Hooker is clearly the B side. He'll be left in the lurch. Is that fair? Knowing if there's a fight booked, you're screwed, like Hooker is.
So, I mean, I'm really glad that Nick brought up the business side because that's really the debate here. If you're looking for the fighters and advocating for them, it makes absolutely no sense to take a fight that short notice, especially because is Chandler the guy you slot in since Hooker is ranked and Chandler hasn't fought yet, and yet he would then just jump to main event? I mean, that's crazy, right? Hooker would get some show money and then just have to wait in the wings and probably fight somebody else to get into contention. I mean, that's ridiculous. Not to mention, as Matt brought up with Styles, but from the business perspective, they absolutely love this. It's one of those things where, Paul Gift did that study on marginal revenue product for fighters, essentially trying to say, if you look at a pay-per-view card, what fights on that card actually draw viewers and are people willing to pay for, using economics and a whole bunch of theories and sound calculations that I've now forgotten because I studied it for way too long trying to figure it out. Basically, what it came down to was that the main event and really is the major draw. Like over 80% of why a casual will buy a pay-per-view is based on the main event. That's why you always see a title fight and maybe a garbage card following it, or one really good fight on any particular card. And then sometimes you're scratching your head saying, how is the rest of this worthy of a card? It's because that main event is a huge deal. The co-main is somewhere around, I think, can be up to 50% or 15% max, something like that. But usually is in the 1 digits in terms of actually making a difference. Any other fight really had a negligible statistical correlation as to why somebody would buy the card. So while stacking the card makes sense from the fighter's perspective and from the fans, because that way, you've lost a great fight, but now you've got 4 other ones you can replace it with. From the business side, you want to save all those good fights to headline fight night cards or headline pay-per-views, because they don't get any more draw. If we do 4 title defenses in one night, you're basically wasting, from a business perspective, you're wasting 2 title fights in terms of drawing power. So it's really are you with the business on this, or are you with the fighters? And that's what it comes down to for this question.
Pat, just curious, when was that study done? What year?
Last year, I believe.
It was last year? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, actually, that's pretty good reference point right there. So gentlemen, let's move on a little bit here, because John Jones, someone that most of us would agree is the greatest talent the sport has ever seen, says that he is never competing at 205 pounds. He's vacated his belt. He is showing Instagram videos of him deadlifting and picking up more heavy things and putting them down in an effort to bulk up for heavyweight. He's throwing the jabs out there on Twitter as he's constantly doing. But Are we to believe him this time? Is he really gone for good at light heavyweight? Is this move to heavyweight going to be a permanent thing? Jay, looks like
Jay's already shaking his head.
Yeah.
No. Final answer. No.
I mean,
That's all I really wanted to say. No way. There's too much for him still. If Izzy beats Jan Blachowicz, you'd think that he'd go, nah, I don't want that smoke. Come on.
And I don't even blame him. I don't think he's out there legitimately lying to us. It's been established that John Jones is not the world's leading expert on what tomorrow John Jones is going to do. The man has an impulse control problem. And he shouldn't have to make, career affecting decisions on the spur of the moment. He probably does feel right now like he never wants to compete at 205 again. He's probably like sitting around his house at like a Jack 240 and saying, oh, hell no, But yeah, all it will take is the right combination of money, attention, and legitimate historical accomplishments on the table for him to go back down to 205. The question is whether that's going to happen. Will there be a situation that tempts him to do it?
Yeah, I think Israel Adesanya would be that temptation. Should he get past Jan Blachowicz?
Oh,
Matt,
Israel Adesanya going like this with the 205 belt? Oh, yes.
And honestly, I mean, like the heavyweight move for John Jones isn't a long-term move because the division isn't deep enough or storied enough at this point in time, in this point in history, where it makes John Jones stay in the division and try to clean it out. He's going up there to hunt for a belt. And then after that, who knows what happens? Because honestly, if he goes and beats Stipe in a fight, becomes heavyweight champion, the biggest and best fight for him next is probably going to be Izzy if he beats Blachowicz. So the idea of John Jones hanging around at heavyweight doesn't really entice me that much, honestly, except for maybe a Francis Ngannou fight.
Yeah.
Even then, I would rather see Izzy because Izzy's going to talk more shit. Is going to galvanize sort of the casual fan base more. It's going to be clearly a bigger fight, I think, for MMA. And it's in a weird way, I think a lot of casual MMA fans will view it as the John Jones Anderson Silva fight that we never got. Like that's the super fight between the light heavyweight champion, the middleweight champion that we never got. So I'm okay with it. And I also think that I think it was either Ben that said that or Jay that John Jones doesn't need to make a life decision or a career-long decision at this point in time. And even if he does, he can go back on it. Like, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal if he feels today, I'm never going to go back down to 205, and then 6 months later, he changes his mind. Like, that's not a big deal.
I think it would be a big deal considering his age. Like, John Jones is no longer a spring chicken. And, gaining that weight to lose it, to then compete at a high level is going to take a serious toll on the average person. Now, he might have bought himself more time with him actually now showing some dedication to training, because keep in mind his earlier title run was him eating junk food and doing blow and doing whatever else, leading up to his fights. So now that he's actually taking a more scientific approach to his training, perhaps it'll be easier to stay in shape, and which would make the weight cuts a little easier, or at least a little bit more calculated. So it could go both ways, but I think age will be the big factor because being what we would see right now about 32,
33.
33. Okay. Yeah. So he's 33 now. You think, okay, perhaps he gets the belt sometime this year at heavyweight. Then you're looking at a 34-year-old, maybe a defense or two. And then you're talking about going down 35, 36, much harder to make that weight cut at that age. So I think time is of the essence for Jones, and what is the better use of his time, considering the limited amount that he has left in the sport.
Well, at heavyweight, he has 10 years at heavyweight just by the way that heavyweight works.
But here's the question. What if he moves up, challenges Miocic, and gets embarrassed? Then what does he do? Does he stick around as just another top 5 heavyweight for another?
He has to go back down.
I mean, I'm not even saying that's what I think is going to happen, but it's a possibility. He's facing arguably the greatest heavyweight ever, who's defied, the odds and the expectations more than once. What happens? What if he loses in a way that doesn't make us want to see him against top heavyweights anymore?
That's true.
Yeah, if it's like a Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier sort of performance.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. I think that is a factor in how his body responds at the heavier weight too. Like let's say if he goes out and wins, but he's super gassed out because his body isn't used to carrying that weight, in a fight like that, then I could see him, making that decision, say, you know what, I'm going to take the year off and get back down to my 205 frame. It all depends on this first performance for me. But to say he's done, nah, I don't buy that for a second.
I mean, to me, the only way he doesn't go back down is if the Adesanya fight falls apart. Like if Adesanya loses to Blachowicz and that fight immediately isn't immediately sort of on everybody's radar anymore. I mean, to me, that's my most anticipated fight heading into 2021. But Jan Blachowicz has beaten a lot of fighters that no one thought he would beat, and so you never know what will happen. But he's going back down for Izzy. If Izzy wins, which he should, which he probably will, that's the fight to make. That's the biggest fight the UFC can make right now. Aside from maybe Habib GSP, even, those are, neck and neck in my opinion. And it's just too big for Jones to pass up. But the thing is, if Izzy falls apart, what else is there at 205? He's not going to go back down to fight Jan Blachowicz, Jiří Procházka. Those fights aren't enticing to John Jones. So if Izzy falls apart, I really could see John Jones staying at heavyweight, fighting the Curtis Blades as Derek Lewis's. Those aren't huge fights, but it's bigger than fighting, Alexander Rakic.
So I mean, it's a good point there. But what if and Jan Blachowicz is someone that we consistently put on the back burner. He is consistently the underdog. I know that's been a frequent topic of discussion on this show. How we're always underestimating him, and he always outperforms our expectations. If he does defeat Israel Adesanya, and he defeats someone else, maybe one more time, do you think that's enough? If we start seeing the semblance of a dominant light heavyweight champion, does John Jones start getting that 205 itch again?
No, man, come on. For the same reasons Nick just said, look at the rest of the top 10 at 205. John's going to look at that and say, cool. Like, big shit there. Like, who cares? I'm beating Derek Lewis, who at least will give me some pay-per-view buys more than any of the Eastern European fighters that are in the top 10 at 205. That's just the unfortunate reality here. And the UFC does not do a good job promoting the 205-pound division. Like, they have clearly just given up trying to make any stars out of that mix. They're hoping that Izzy comes in here, beats Blachowicz, and is a 205-pound star and stays there probably. That's probably their hope. So, no, I like Nick said, if Izzy loses, John's not coming back to 205.
Another factor too to keep in mind is what does his contract status look like? Davison Figueiredo was just complaining about not having pay-per-view points.
That one hurt. That one hurt
right,
here to read
right.
that.
We know Jones gets pay-per-view points as of now as champion. If he goes up to heavyweight and loses, does he still keep his pay-per-view points? We've heard a lot of champions say that their contracts were crap once they lost that belt. And Luke Rockhold held out for quite some time as a result. I remember TJ Dillashaw making some statements about that as well. So, having those fights against the Derek Lewis, which definitely sound enticing, may not have the pay-per-view points attached to it. So why would that be the influencing factor when you could just go to 205, get that belt back, and get more money? So definitely a lot of things to consider here, and something we can debate and speculate on all night. But let's keep it pushing here. Kyoji Horiguchi, if he came back to the UFC at bantamweight, this man did work at Rizin over New Year's. Now, if he came back to the UFC at bantamweight, who is the highest ranked opponent in that division that you see him defeating?
It's going to sound strange to say this, but I'm going to view him as not the strongest fighter in the division. But I believe that Horiguchi could beat Peter Yan. But I don't believe he could beat every top 15 bantamweight. I think Aljo Sterling would give him a real hard time. Corey Sandhagen could be a real tricky matchup. Cody Garbrandt would get dusted. Right now, if you slot him in, I would favor him over more fighters in the division than say like a Hani Barcelos moving up the division to say how would he do against Jose Aldo and Marlon Moraes. I would, the way he's looking at 135 in the division and the way he moved, this was a very important thing. To see his first appearance after a major, major injury, ligaments torn, separated, resurgically attached, blah, 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 for a year layoff, to see him come out there and dust Kai Asakura, a guy who sparked him the year before. I think that was really important. So I think should he come back, he would be an immediate factor. But I think he'd probably drop back down to 125 because who the hell wouldn't want to see Horiguchi fight Davison Figueiredo? Come on.
Yeah. That was my next question there. Like, would you rather see him at bantamweight or flyweight? I say flyweight. That just sounds too exciting right there to see Figueiredo against Horiguchi. Anybody want to make a case for bantamweight being the better destination if Horiguchi made his way back to the UFC?
It's the bigger division with bigger names. I mean, like, that's just the reality. Like, I think the purists in us will all admit that, yeah, Horiguchi is more of a 125-pounder, so we want to fight Figueiredo. That makes sense in our minds. But if he's fighting at 135 and 135 has Jose Aldo in it, Marlon Moraes, people that aren't even in the top 3 or 4, those are big legacy fights for him. That even though I don't think Horiguchi is the size to compete with those guys, he's still going to do it because that's bigger names, bigger money, bigger legacy fights. So yeah, unfortunately, I think he would stay at 135 because of the depth there, unlike 125.
And he's not that tiny. I mean, he's not ridiculously undersized for the division. He's bigger and wider than Henry Cejudo. By the eyeball test, he looks like he is one of the 10 best bantamweights in the world, and he looks like with the right matchup, he could beat almost any of them. But still, the best bantamweight he's beaten is Darian Caldwell. And I like Darian Caldwell, but at his best, when they met the first time, Caldwell was a borderline top 15 bantamweight. That's the best that he's done. So I'd love to see it, but I'm not going to make the mistake of falling into my recency bias and arguing that Hani Barcelos could beat top 5 bantamweights like Jay was making fun of me for about 5 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, he did contend for a UFC title, so Horiguchi is certainly a championship level fighter in the UFC. But also, I mean, you bring up something interesting there. Would you rather see him go back to Bellator and recapture that bantamweight title?
I think he'll get a shot at going back to Bellator regardless. I mean, he never lost the belt. It's something that makes sense for a cross promotion. You got Juan Archuleta already calling him out and doing a little poster about it. I think without a doubt, you're going to get that fight. When it comes to Horiguchi and going into the UFC, I think the flyweight is, coming back at flyweight is extremely tempting again, because that's easier for him. That's a division where he thrived before he left. He got, all the way to a championship fight. But I also think bantamweight would be nice. And I could see him, coming in and doing a lot of damage. I'm with Jay and Ben here where I think he could run the gamut. It's hard to say really without seeing him against a top 10 guy. If he came back now, I'd love to see him against a Marlon Moraes or even a Rob Font, maybe something like that would make a lot of sense. But, he definitely looks like a brand new man since leaving and going over to Rizin. Not just, yes, he has, obviously he has a level of competition that's not as stiff as the UFC. That's just how it is, especially with the UFC's stacked bantamweight division. But let's not forget that, he did fight Tenshin Nasukawa in kickboxing, and he did all right against who may be one of the greatest kickboxers up and coming now. They're talking about this huge K1 fight between him and Takeru. I mean, this is not a slouch. And the fact that he could stand there and strike with him extremely well makes me think that, especially against strikers in the UFC at bantamweight, he could probably dust someone like Marlon Moraes or Rob Font. I would put him in the top 5 for sure right now, I think.
I agree. I mean, maybe it is my recency bias getting to me, like Ben alluded to, but I mean, I would favor Kyoji to beat Peter Yan. And like Jay said, it's kind of interesting where the Sterling fight might be closer, on paper to me. The Corey Sandhagen fight stylistically might be a little closer, but I mean, I would put Horiguchi in the top 5 on paper for sure. And I think he could be a champion, which is crazy to think, but he's really good. And people don't give him enough credit because he's not in the UFC. He's in Rizin. But yeah, I mean, don't make a mistake about it. Horiguchi is a top. I mean, he's absolutely top 15, no doubt about it. But he's easily top 5 as well.
Yeah, for me, if he's coming back to the UFC, if that is a thing that were to happen, I would say come back at flyweight, just because that's a shorter path to the title. And then once you have that belt, recent history has shown you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can jump around divisions and, challenge for the champ status. And then you could, really prove where you are in terms of like historic greats. So I think flyweight, get that title, and then see what other options are there. If Pettry still has the belt or whoever has it 2 years from now, like that would be an interesting thing to look at.
Definitely some good stuff, and hopefully I want to see Horiguchi come back and fight on American soil, whether it be Bellator or the UFC, just to mix things up a little bit. Just somebody who feels like his UFC run was incomplete. For him to get cut so soon after
he wasn't cut. The dude left in a win streak. He just said, "I'm getting more money in Japan."
No, yeah, phrasing. Yeah, you're right. But to see him lose,
anyone beating Demetrius.
Yeah, exactly.
He had that effect on a lot of people.
Definitely not him at that point in his career. I mean, that was a Canelo versus Floyd moment where a guy with all the potential in the world just got the title shot way too soon.
Really good point.
But on that point, Ben, I mean, is Horiguchi now to the point where like Canelo was, where you like beat like Miguel Cotto and like started establishing himself actually as a real, all-time fighter? I mean, I don't see that with Horiguchi. I see him fighting top 15, top 20 competition, but not fighting anyone in the top 10 at either division. So it's hard to gauge right now because he is styling in a lot of ways over in Japan because he is gifted, and we saw that he was gifted in the UFC. But we also saw that he lost at a certain level in the UFC. So I think it's really hard to gauge right now where it's, 3 years removed since he was in the UFC?
Yeah, but his only loss was to Mighty Mouse.
He lost to one of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
In the literal last second armbar because Mighty Mouse is like, yeah, we're done here.
But I do agree with Matt. I don't think we don't have proof that Kyoji is a top 5 guy. It's kind of like Hamza Chimaev. We can't say for sure that he is a top 10 welterweight, but based on his wins over, a couple cans, so to speak, he looks like a top 10 guy. You haven't seen it, but it seems that way. So it's kind of similar to me.
Yep.
So before I say anything else, I'll have to apologize because you might hear a phone ringing in the background. I think my mother-in-law left her phone on my couch, and I can't get up to turn the ringer off. So anyway, let's move on to the greatest title segment in all of media. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. So a lot of things, well, actually, probably not a whole lot of stuff happened, but things happened since we last convened. And let's talk about something that surprised you or ironically did not. So, Matt the Greater, what is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
I guess it would have to be the insistence of Dana White to rebook Chimaev versus Edwards. Like again, for why? Oh, I mean, why did we fall? Why did we get married to this matchup? It's a strange thing to me, and I don't understand it. I've been on this roller coaster with this matchup. Like I hated it at first, and then I started to fall in love with it, and now it fell apart again. It's like, okay, just move on for now. Let's revisit this at another date. Let's get Leon a fight. COVID fucked up his whole 2020. If he's ready to fight, let him fight right now.
Yeah, it feels like with this fight booking just won't leave us. This is becoming like the new Tony Khabib or something, where it just the MMA gods are trying to tell us something.
Except we wanted the Tony Khabib fight.
Yeah, we don't want.
Yeah. Well, we don't want this one. I mean,
UFC wants this one. This is the Cody Garbrandt fast track. Go look at what they did with Cody Garbrandt getting the title shot. This is exactly what they're doing with Chimaev. It's all business.
I want to see it just so I can see Leon Edwards outbox him and the UFC just have their plans totally fall through. That's really the only reason why I want to see this fight. But it doesn't make any sense, so I don't understand why this is still a thing. Pat, what is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, aside from Nick Baldwin saying that Chimaev fought cans and, messing with, our money at the Chimaev News Network over at the Body Lock.
I hope Rise McKee isn't listening. Sorry if you are.
No. My actual not surprised, Mr. Falcons, is Rizin 26, Shibatar versus Hiroya. You had a legit kickboxer with a legit record get submitted by a YouTuber. It was something to see. Guy's chin has just made a granite 8 shots all day, but he held his own. He landed a couple good shots. And then, MMA rules. He ended up getting an armbar. Hiroya taps and then misses it. Ref misses it. And then they have to go back later and do an executive review where they say, oh, actually, no, he did tap. I mean, it's something to see an actual person who dedicated their life, who had a solid enough record in kickboxing. It wasn't like stellar, right? But still, I think it was 37-17, something like that. So he's at least averaging 66% win rate there. To get beaten by a YouTuber was just that. I mean, that upset of the year for me right there was that. That was crazy.
Jay, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment?
I was so not surprised when that fight happened that Pat mentioned of Shibatar and Hiroya. But I am truly on both sides of the coin right now when it comes to the Twitterverse and the MMA community, because MMA Twitter as a whole is still completely gullible, like to a degree that one click, you'd look at the information and a fake story that was posted that somehow spread around, you'd go, no, that's fake. Like these are the kind of things that are so easy to tell that it's just some fictional account trying to mess with people and break stories and fake break stories and get traction. That people in outlets that shall remain nameless fell for it and had to retract the story because goofball, I don't even remember the name of the person because I think Twitter has since pulled them down, posted about an upcoming fight in March, saying that TJ Dillashaw was going to fight Jose Aldo. Total work of fiction. Had they just kind of made it up out of nowhere, and people, by and large, bought it. Just, oh my God, that's amazing. I can't believe they're making that fight. How do people fall for these things anymore? I don't get it. I don't know if I will get it. And it's not because I'm looking down on the people that fall for it, but I'm kind of looking down on the people that fall for it because all you got to do, I'm not a journalist. I'm a reporter at best. But when I find there's a story that comes out, I click to read it because I want to see the story. And when there's not a story attached, when they say there's a story attached, you kind of go, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure about this. Just do your reading first, MMA Twitter. Please make life easier for us. And to those outlets that shall still remain nameless, shame on y'all. Come on, man.
Yeah, it definitely helps to read the actual Twitter handle, not just the display name. That normally is a big clue. So I believe one time there was an account that said that I had James Lynch's picture with Nick's name. Was that you, Nick?
Maybe. I have no idea.
I mean but that's a sign you made it right there. So Nick, salute to you. Ben, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, I suppose it's only fitting that since last week I talked about the return of Mike the Truth Jackson to the UFC Octagon, I will talk this week about the postponement of that fight. As word came out from his scheduled opponent, Dean Barry, set to make his UFC debut, saying that the fight had been postponed until March or April. And while he didn't specify any reasons why, he did claim that it was due to Jackson. Now, I will put on my journalist hat for the once a year that I do that, and I will say that a source close to the situation revealed to me, "Thanks for checking in. It ain't the Rona."
Oh, that's good.
So,
that's good.
I'll be looking forward to seeing a friend of the show, Mike Jackson, in the UFC Octagon in March or April.
I just thought Dana was gonna, needed more time to write insulting things about him to say on the podium.
Get some cue cards.
Yeah. So now, Matt the Lesser, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
I'm not surprised the UFC drove up their pay-per-view prices, both for standard definition and HD on ESPN Plus. Not surprised by that at all. I mean, come on. The fact that they lowered it to begin with when they started with ESPN Plus for ESPN Plus subscribers, and it was kind of like a bullshit, like what, $5-10 in terms of lowering the price. We knew that at some point they were going to drive that price back up, and that's what's happening. Welcome to a monopsony power company that doesn't care about the consumers.
I can't remember who shared this on Twitter when the news broke about the price increase, but it pretty much saying like, hey, UFC fans have shown themselves to be suckers for this content, and they stuck with it throughout, massive dips in quality and all sorts of price changes and schedule changes and long stretches of every weekend, and just the blind loyalty. It was just a matter of time before they got more money from all of us suckers out there. Nick, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, I don't know if I should be surprised about this or not surprised. I guess I am surprised, and I probably shouldn't be surprised. I didn't expect to go on Twitter and see Mike Perry's leg lying in a pool of blood with a smashed glass door off to the left. I don't know what happened. No one really does. He kept on tweeting a bunch of, kind of bizarre things, but I hope he's okay. I hope his girlfriend is okay. I hope he gets the help he clearly needs. Just a bizarre situation, and certainly not something I expected to see, even if I probably should have expected to see it.
Yeah. At this point, Mike Perry can't do much to surprise me. Matt, what's up?
Clearly he was drunk and tried to kick the door open, right? That's what if I had to guess.
Probably, but who knows? With Mike Perry, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I know the times that I've been drunk and kicked doors open. I kick the frame, I kick like the solid part of the door that just,
it doesn't shatter.
Yeah, the part that doesn't shatter into pieces and carve your leg up.
Such a keyboard warrior, telling professional fighters how they should kick doors.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Rampage Jackson. You see up there.
It's all about the teep. All about the teep. All right, so my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment comes courtesy of Scott Coker, who in an interview with MMA Fighting revealed that yes, he indeed is happy that the UFC is releasing fighters because he intends on picking them up. The honesty of a promoter, it just shocked the hell out of me. For all you people out there that were like, oh, the Bellator, they don't want the Bellator, they don't want Anderson Silva. You're lying to yourselves, okay? They went back on the Yoel thing. I know they still want Anderson Silva. Stop bullshit and stop lying. We're not believing it. Scott Coker, thank you for being honest in this statement. Okay, we don't hear promoters just say it like it is all the time, and that was sorely needed. So I appreciate that, Mr. Coker. Now, let's move on to some more 2020 end of the year discussion. 2020 is now behind us. That year sucked. Hopefully this one does not suck for us, because, man, 2020 was certified ass crack. Now, so let's talk about submissions, because 2020 did see some pretty cool submissions. My submission of the year, AJ McKee over Darian Caldwell. I believe that move is called 100%. It's like, it looks kind of like a modified guillotine. I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong. Someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody on the panel who might be able to kick my ass, please go ahead and tell me what it is, Ben.
I'm not saying I could pull the move off, but immediately afterwards, at least the Sherdog Slack was all just going off like, what should we even call that? It was a kind of neck crank, and Ed Carbajal, contributor to Sherdog as well as a couple other outlets, and a black belt in jiu-jitsu, came up with some nice photos of an old Bas Rutten street self-defense book that he owned, and it had Boss doing the exact same move, tucking a guy's head into his armpit from guard, but he had him in full guard instead of the body triangle, and simply just did a body lock. Didn't grab the one underhook and then do the grip over his head. It was basically the same move, and it was just basically a slightly modified neck crank from guard. Not as uncommon in grappling, but the first time we'd ever seen it, at least in a high-level mixed martial arts fight.
Nice. So anyone want to make a case against that as submission of the year?
I'm going to just go ahead and second that one. That's the one. I mean, if any submission makes you pull out old Bas Rutten tapes, I mean, listen, it's got to win.
There you go. I will say that nothing beat it for me. That was my submission of the year. and it was a pleasure to like write up a summary of it for my site. But my number 2 submission of the year came on the last day of the year in Ayaka Hamasaki's neck scissors set up by a Kimura on Miyu Yamamoto. I mean, it looked like a pro wrestling spot being pulled off in a real fight against a resisting opponent, and it was just absolutely amazing. I loved it.
I would like to chime in that I too, I second or third or fourth the motion of the McKee as it stands today. However, there's one major important submission that seemed to fall off a lot of lists, and maybe it's because of how it was performed. But Ariane Lipski's knee bar of Luana Carolina, when she was on top and cranked the knee the very wrong way, was one, and to force a verbal tap like that, because it was she got the old Joe Warren out of her. It was a very odd position. Like, I've seen plenty of knee bars. Mackenzie Dern had a knee bar this year that was worth talking about, but that was one of those like, oh,
I tapped 3 seconds before Luana Carolina did. Like, I was tapping my chair at home. I was like, what are you doing? Tap.
So you know what, I think we can open this up to a little bit of broader discussion that can transition into the next topic here. So we all have our different criteria for what meets submission of the year, and is it rarity? Is it something standard performed on someone high level? Where do you see your criteria as when deciding what stands out throughout all the plethora of fights that we watch over the course of the year?
It has to be just crazy shit, right? Like, honestly, like it can be like impact and moment, but then you start getting into like a more of a generic sense, especially like submissions, where you have such a variety of submissions, a variety to finish opponents, much different than like a knockout, even like let's say boxing, where there's only so many amounts of punches you can throw, so every boxing knockout of the year kind of looks the same. But in MMA, there is such a deep variety on how to finish people. So it has to be the obscure, crazy shit. Von Flue chokes, the Mackenzie guillotine, whatever. Like, I want the craziest shit. I want, like, flying submissions. I want that. Because even though, let's say, probably the biggest submission in terms of what had the most eyeballs on it, was probably talked about the most, technically from just the most amount of people, is probably what Khabib and Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But you compare that to any of the, again, crazy shit, or as the Diaz brothers say, the crazy spinning shit. It doesn't compete in a way. I get really purist when it comes to MMA submissions of the year, knockouts of the year. It impact and like the magnitude of the fight starts to not be as much of a factor when it comes to these topics. To me, for other people, it's fine if they view Khabib Gaethje as the biggest submission of the year, because that was probably technically the biggest submission of the year, because most people watched that over Mackenzie, the Mackenzie guillotine or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, Pat, it looks like you're about to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I think it has to be rarity to an extent, and I think if you get into several crazy submissions, or you get to a point where you've got a couple of submissions that are close, then you start to look at, level of opponent, technique used, things of that nature. But I mean, let's be honest, even if it's the slickest, best ever rear naked choke that we've ever seen, it's never going to win submission of the year. Same with guillotine. Those happen too often. So, when you look at the submission of the year, it's almost always at least a little bit rare, or just looks so gnarly, if it's not, right? I mean, you had a lot of options this year. I mean, one that kind of was not talked about a lot was that banana split in CFFC, right? That was crazy, and that kind of fell off of the radar because it just wasn't, among Hamasaki for me was number 2, McKee I'll second or fifth or whatever as the submission for me. But I mean, rarity always plays a massive factor in these things, I think. And then if you get to a point where you get 2 or 3 or 4 that are really awesome and crazy, then you start looking about, what's the level of competition? How did they pull it off? And I think the McKee one really checks all the boxes this year, but I don't know how you can say rarity isn't a part of the conversation for submission of the year.
Yeah, for me, rarity is definitely like the number 1 criteria, right? And then you consider importance of the fight. But you also have to consider like the fighter that's pulling it off. because if Bryce Mitchell is trying to go for his conspiracy twister for the 4th time, like I don't care at that point. Like that play, that like it's not as impressive anymore.
Well, I mean, looking back at some of the, if you want to just go from a historic perspective, if Sherdog, we have the yearly rankings of the yearly awards, so we can go back in these. This year's for Sherdog staff, the pick was the McKee team. The year before was Bryce Mitchell's Twister. Again, super rare and very impressive. The one beforehand, some dashing gentleman in 2018 wrote about Ryan Hall's heel hook of BJ Penn, which I don't know who that might have been. The year before, the year before was Mighty Mouse's that thing. The what do he call it? The Mighty Whiz Bar, I think is what he officially.
I think the same sexy bastard wrote that article as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't remember.
That's a
I
handsome.
thought it was some homely dude that wrote that one.
The handsome.
I'm pretty sure it was a homely
motherfucker
dude that wrote the one before.
Oh.
It could have been, and then the one beforehand was Ben Rothwell's go-go choke of Josh Barnett. So it's all unusual quality opponents. I mean, tapping out BJ Penn, forget about it. And it's, I think, an important thing. And this is a personal criteria, not one necessarily that should be applied across the board. Memorable. It sticks out. You can see it now, like that. That's something that with the COVID landscape and the events wall to wall, it's hard to really be the one that you can remember. Like, God, I couldn't remember how the last Curtis Blades fight went. I remember he won, but that's about, that's all I could think of. Whereas certain style finishes, things like that, the McKee team, I can see it right the second. I couldn't ever pretend to do it myself, but I can see it happening. And I think that has to matter to me to a degree. And that, and the leg scissor choke that Hamasaki hit, because what the heck was that? I didn't see it coming. The Bryce Mitchell's Twister, you can see those kinds of things still. So I think that legacy sticks with me.
All right. Any other thoughts on our criteria here? All right. Well, how about we apply some of this criteria to knockout of the year? Do the same things apply? Rarity as opposed to level of opposition? I see some shaking heads.
It doesn't have to be rarity. A lot of them are just completely standard punches and kicks, but there's a visual panache to a knockout that there usually isn't to a submission. I mean, when a submission finishes, everyone is frozen in place. You could take a painting of it if the person wasn't about to die. With knockouts, there's something kinetic about it. It's a ballet where somebody dies. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be a ridiculous, hopping, spinning back hook kick like it was this year. Sometimes just a regular old kick or punch.
All right, so fellas, I mean, that seems to be the consensus knockout of the year. I disagree. I think Kevin Holland deserves the honors on that one. But I mean, I see raised eyebrows from both the greater and the lesser. So
then expound on that. Why does that knockout stand above?
So gentlemen, please, greater, lesser, pull up, get this work.
I'll let greater first because he is the greater, of course.
Okay. Well,
I think it's story time, first of all.
I believe that Kevin Holland should be the recipient of the KO of the year, simply because one, it was a much higher level opponent, and two, while that spin kick was spectacular, a spin kick is one of the more forceful things that you can do in martial arts. Punching someone from the ground and knocking them out is absolutely unheard of. That just does not happen. The amount of leverage that you need to generate from the ground, unheard of, does not happen. You won't see it again. We'll see other spin kick knockouts.
I'll let Matt the Greater go first because he seemed like he was itching.
Come on, let's go.
There's a reason that this thing is on my phone. I have it on my lock screen. I have never done that before ever in my life. Ever in my life have I ever put a knockout on my lock screen on my phone. That is how ridiculous this thing is. And you to dismiss it. You have the gall to dismiss it for somebody just punching off of their back. Like
from somebody just punching off their back?
Sir. Just because Jacare got lazy in his guard, thinking that he was safe, and dismiss Kevin Holland's 92-inch reach.
Does not make old. He got old.
A special knockout. I'm sorry.
I think you're wrong, Matt. I think that, for one, we do see a lot of spinning back kick knockouts. Like, we do. Like, sorry, we see a lot more spinning knockouts in terms of kicks. I know, I've seen it. I've seen it a lot. I've seen Uriah Hall knock out that one guy in Tough 1,000 fucking times. Like, we've seen this a bit. To Ant's point,
never seen a kick get caught, and the improbability to throw the spinning kick off.
I mean, we saw Ben Henderson almost land that on Frankie Edgar. So the thing is, we've seen something close to that before. How many times? The only one, Pat and I were talking about this earlier today. The only other one that we could think of in the realm was Nico Price and Danny Brown, but that was technically so completely different.
Randy Brown, even though I would love to see Danny Brown.
Randy Brown. Sorry.
Oh, man.
And quickly,
Danny Brown's a rapper, right? Yeah.
Those guys aren't Jacare. Like, that's also another factor here that does weigh into this equation, right? Because it's not like Kevin Holland just like had a overhand right and knocked out Jacare. What he did was unique. It was rare. It was crazy. And to Ben's point, I think, was about the kineticism of knockouts and the visceral reaction we get from knockouts. It's different than submissions. And I'll be honest, when Kevin Holland was whooping on Jacare against the fence on his back, I was standing up screaming at my TV because it was insanity and somebody needed to stop the fight. Okay? So while that spinning kick knockout, it was unique, especially with the fact they had to get caught and spin off of that. That is unique. But we've also seen that a lot. And the competition level wasn't that great. What Kevin Holland did to Jacare was insanity. Insanity. So I will say this. It's either one or the other. And it's okay if you want to pick yours, Matt. But there is an argument for Kevin Holland over that knockout. And it's a valid argument.
The greater has become the lesser, and the lesser has become the greater. Matt the lesser. How would you like to respond to Matt the greater?
Oh my God. Listen. I'll say this: the Kevin Holland knockout was my number 2 knockout of the year. Okay, but I'm talking a very wide gap. It's a wide gap for me between number 1 and number 2.
I don't think it really helps the case that it was on Jacare either. I mean, not only is Jacare pretty faded at this point, but for the longest time, his only legit loss was due to an up kick. Maybe there's a button underneath his chin that you can only see if he's standing over you.
That's how you knock out alligators. You got to get up under their,
all those people he trashed at Abu Dhabi and at Mundials were like, dude, if this were a real fight, I would, like maybe that's what it is.
Well, Matt being a Louisiana native, he knows about alligators, but still,
it's really interesting though to interject real quick that a knockout that has gotten more traction than the Jacare Holland knockout is actually what Cody Garbrandt did to Rafael Assunção. That maybe it's because of the visceral, maybe it's because of the sequence, the duck down, the gadouche. But that actually, I mean, Sherdog forums are running a big poll on it, and that's the number 2 right now, behind Buckley, is the Garbrandt knockout. Is that would that step over Jacare or the Holland Jacare or no?
It shouldn't, but I can see why. Because if you said the sequence of the duck under hook, it was something beautiful about it. Like there was like a magnifico, like it was just artistic in a way, even though it was just a plain hook.
Well, knockout of the year is a gift contest in a way that submission of the year is not. How spectacular does this look in 5 to 7 seconds?
I will say real quickly about the level of competition. I'm one of the biggest Jacare fans. I think most of you know that. I was very upset when it happened. I made some sad crocodile noises. It's bad time. But some of you guys talking about, level of competition. Jacare is old as hell. He is 41. He has looked like trash in his last couple of fights. Quit acting like Jacare is still, Mr. Jacare going in there and destroying Vitor Belfort and looking great in the fight against Yoel Romero, all that stuff. That's not the case, man. It's I'm sorry. He's old. The level of competition is not there anymore.
But no,
he was Blachowicz last year, though.
The level of competition in his losses are top 5 and top 10 names. Okay, the knockout that we're questioning or talking about are between guys that aren't even in the top 30.
Yeah, it's like guys off the Contender Series.
Like,
but his
leagues of difference here. There's leagues of difference between Jacare and Buckley. There just is. Like, I'm sorry, you lose to Jack Romanson and Kevin Holland and Kevin Gastelum. Like, those are great opponents to lose to. You still beat Chris Weidman.
Yeah, in the last second on a Hail Mary punch, and beyond that, it doesn't matter. It's because he's not fighting the young up-and-comers. Are you telling me that if Jacare fights again, and let's say he fights a Buckley or someone else, he gets destroyed? That doesn't – it never happens where they're terrible, especially when you get to the level Jacare is at. It doesn't happen where they're terrible and then they fight a non-top 30 guy. Like, that doesn't happen. They go gradually down. His losses, he's looked – very bad. This is coming from a great Jacare fan. He's looked terrible in his last fights. That Jan Blachowicz fight, come on. He's looked awful.
You said Jan Blachowicz, current light heavyweight champion?
He lost a decision to a current champion. Like, what are we talking about here? He lost a decision to a current champion.
Yeah.
And
how many strikes did they throw? How many strikes?
I'm not saying it was a great fight. He still lost a decision to a current champion.
You know that Derek Lewis beat Francis Ngannou too, right? You want to run that one back?
Francis Ngannou is not a current champion.
Fight of the year.
Blachowicz is a current champion.
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't even.
Buckley's not even top 30.
Pat, the reason why you're not winning this argument is because you're wrong. Nick, please.
I was just gonna say the thing is, Impa Kasanganay is not a guy off the street. That's not me in there. Because if it was me in there, Damian Maia could have done that spinning kick and knocked me out or knocked the guy off the street out. Like, that could have happened, and that wouldn't have been impressive. But Impa Kasanganay was undefeated coming in. I know not everybody from the Contender Series is a world beater or a top prospect, but I mean, this wasn't as big of a gap in competition as we're making it out to be. I agree with Pat and everybody else. Jacare is not the guy he used to be. And for me personally, the competition doesn't mean as much. It's all about, when I was watching Buckley's kick, I jumped up and screamed. When I was watching Holland, maybe it's because I'm a Jacare fan. I was sad, but I obviously had a surprise reaction and an excited reaction, but it wasn't as big. Buckley wowed me more, so that's the knockout of the year.
You know what, Nick? That is a fair and balanced approach to your logic. Matt the Lesser is wrong. Pat Auger is wrong, even if the outcome is the same, that they agree. Matt the Greater, enjoy your promotion. So I really think that you had a 1A, 1B argument here. Because to say that what Buckley did was not spectacular would just be a lie. Like, it's not my number one, but it was damn impressive. But we're also talking about apples and oranges here. If you're comparing Jacare, even the diminished version of Jacare, who just came off of a split decision loss in the main event against the current light heavyweight champion, to a guy who doesn't have a Wikipedia page. Sorry, Strikeforce champion versus guy without Wikipedia page. I rest my case as far as level of competition.
Justin Gaethje didn't have a Wikipedia page for a long time.
What are you talking about? You told me Adesanya didn't have a Wikipedia page for the longest time either. I'm pretty sure he didn't have one.
When he proved himself as an elite level mixed martial artist, got one.
Yeah, and so if Buckley let's say Buckley goes on a crazy run here and gets the belt, then it's okay.
Then it's okay. No. It won't retroactively change my opinion about this knockout. But if he goes on to be a contender and top 10 fighter, that's awesome. It has no bearing on this knockout because this knockout's in a microcosm of time and context.
Joaquin Buckley has a Wikipedia page.
Yes, he does.
But
really because of this knockout.
Kasanganay doesn't.
Yeah, Kasanganay doesn't. That's what I mean.
Buckley fought for Bellator before he came to the UFC, so he met the notoriety threshold before then.
Yeah, well, and Buckley's knockout also became like a international trending topic, and had the president calling Dana White to talk about. So there's a certain level of, I think this is the knockout equivalent of the Khamzat-Chimaev argument.
It's funny how none of those things happened with the Kevin Holland knockout. Weird.
Well, maybe
Ben just got fed up with this and just bounced.
Ben is sick of our shit. Wow, he started controlling you morons. All right, so let's let's move on a little bit here. I mean, do we think? Since you guys are so high on the Buckley knockout here, do you think it was better than Masvidal and Askren last year?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Yes. 1,000%.
Yeah.
Ant disagrees, I think.
Come on, one knockout has far more impact, was far more viral, was a far more bigger moment for the sport than the other, right? Can we all agree on that at least?
Yeah, Buckley. It blew the doors off for social media.
Yeah. Kanye did a song about it.
Are we acting like Masvidal, Ben Askren knockout wasn't the most viral moment for the sport in 2019?
I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying,
2019, yes.
Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all those other platforms, Buckley blew them all out of the water.
It blew Masvidal.
Masvidal after that knockout went on to fight for a made up title with a whole bunch of celebrity appeal to it. And Buckley went on to fight another person debuting in the UFC off of the Contender Series.
And how many people watched that fight, Ant?
So we're talking about the impact of the knockout, not the knockout itself. Then,
yeah,
I agree. Because we're talking about the knockout itself, just what happened in the cage, the physical interaction. Buckley's knockout's better still.
Yeah, there's a difference between biggest knockout. There's a difference between biggest knockout and best knockout. Masvidal was bigger, absolutely, just because of the star power, but Buckley's was better.
But I don't.
I can dig that.
A 6 second flying knee knockout against the incoming undefeated out of the UFC guy, okay, and then going on for all of what Masvidal did. I think it is comparable. I will say this, the Buckley knockout on paper from a technique perspective is better, but the 6 second or 4 second, however long it was, flying knee, that was amazing. Like, let's not discredit how amazing the knockout was. Like, it is a very close discussion here between how amazing these knockouts are, their impact, the technique of them. This isn't like apples and oranges. This is a comparable discussion, right?
The Masvidal thing is so impressive because of the time. Like, we've seen flying knee knockouts all the time. 6 seconds makes it more impressive.
Absolutely.
But we've also seen 6, 7, 8 second knockouts before. You know, Dwayne Ludwig, Ryan Jimmo. There's been a couple more, but those are the ones that come to mind right off the bat. Guys get caught instantly. It happens on the regional scene all the time too, where guys just aren't ready when the ref says go. You see a guy dart across the cage and just hit him with one punch or one kick or whatever, and they're done.
Like you said, we've seen on the regional scene a lot more. I don't think we've ever seen it at the highest level, like for a title contender fight like that. Have we? Maybe I'm wrong. Going off
it's the fastest knockout in UFC history, and of all the ones that are under 15 seconds or so, it was by far like between the highest ranked fighters.
Okay.
The only one I think that can compare is Kid Yamamoto to Miata in the Heroes event, where he just ran over there 4 seconds, boom, dead. But also, Kid Yamamoto here, I don't believe it was for any sort of contention, and it was a Heroes event, which, people argue whether it was, even a major event.
Well, and it really depends on your definition of impact, because there's revenue driving impact, and there's social media impressions and marketing. And when it comes to marketing, Buckley by far is bigger. You had Kanye do a song about it, which is a trash song, but still, like it got more eyes on the sport and got more casual people that would never tune into it to see that knockout and to think, oh, the UFC in their mind. In terms of actual revenue driver, by far Masvidal. I mean, you had that really launched him into getting the BMF belt, who then really beating Nate is what took him to the level of really drawing in and getting the higher pay-per-view buys, as we've seen when somebody ends up taking out a high pay-per-view drawing person, that rub kind of transfers to them, i.e. Holly Holm, all over the place. That's why she's headlining fights to this day and getting title shots all the time. So, I mean, you got to understand and really define the criteria there. But yeah, it's definitely similar and it's close. I would definitely say that. There's no way you could look at that and say, oh, it's Buckley by a large margin. vice versa.
No,
It's
no,
close in terms of the impact.
I don't want to derail us any further, but I feel like it's another important question. Yair Rodriguez's no-look elbow that won knockout of the year previous. I mean, what I think this is what we're trying to drill down here is how does the Buckley knockout, and Ant can disagree, and that's okay. But how does the Buckley knockout stand in the pantheon of all-time memorable knockouts? Because it should, even if it doesn't have the same name attached to it, like a Korean Zombie and Rodriguez, that kind of doesn't have that same. I mean, Buckley is still not a household name. Buckley is fighting, I think, in a couple weeks against Alessio Di Chirico, a Italian guy on a losing streak. So he didn't get the pay-per-view main event kind of slot, whereas the other guys did. So does this Buckley knockout, does it hold up to like the Rodriguez Korean Zombie knockout?
I think when we're talking about just for the untrained eye, for like a casual fan, someone who's just tuning into the UFC from time to time, yeah, it probably would rank higher because it's a kick, and kicks are more exciting to most people than punches or elbows would be. But if you know what you're looking at, if you are, anyone who can consider themselves a true fan of mixed martial arts, you got to go with the Korean Zombie knockout, because the rarity of the technique combined with the style of the opponent, the ranking, the main event status, it came at the very last second. The entire story is just better. It's just simply better.
It came at the very last second, and unlike, say, Demetrius Johnson's last second armbar, it changed the outcome of the fight if it had gone just one more second. Like, Korean Zombie was going to win that fight if that fight went one more second. So, like, yeah, it's especially if you were watching it as a fan or media member going into it at the time, and you knew the stakes, and you would watch the whole fight rather than taking it in as a GIF or a highlight on SportsCenter the next day. It has just that much more weight to it.
All right, fellas. So obviously we could talk about this one forever and a day, and we should have just done a separate show just about this topic, because that would have been an enlightening discussion, and we get to see Matt Wells demoted even further. So now let's transition to something else here, because I'm not quite sure, due to the pandemic, how schedules played out and travel restrictions and whatnot. How many of us actually made it to a live event this year?
In the beginning of the year, maybe.
Well, yeah. I'm sure you'd covered something, right?
I probably covered a boxing event, obviously, in like January or February. So
yeah, and you didn't do Bellator with. I got credentialed under your outlet, actually, for Bellator, I think. Yeah, for Bellator 238, I think it was. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But anyway, so just wanted to know, we can have the fight of the year conversation there, but I think the general consensus is going to go Weili Zhang and Joanna Jacek, possibly Figueiredo Moreno, and then Hooker Poirier come up in that, and Hill Watterson. There's some really good fights, but I wanted to know, what is the best fight you have witnessed with your own two eyes this year, if you've made it to an event?
I'll go first. And I think it's one that a lot of people really kind of forget about in terms of fight of the year contenders, considering, the controversy of the outcome. And that's Dominic Reyes, John Jones. A lot of people thought Dominic won that fight, including myself. I scored it for Dominic, sitting there cage side. That's a hell of a fight. And for a guy to, come in on the scene, burst on the scene really, and, in my opinion, go out there and take a win, beat John Jones in a decision, in my opinion, that's a big moment that a lot of people really aren't talking about it. And when it comes to, end of the year awards and stuff like that. So that was by far, I think, the best fight that I witnessed personally this year.
And you, Ben and Jay, you were at that event too, right?
Yeah. So I feel like there may be a couple of fights from the same card, which is fine. Duffy, what do you got before I pick it?
No, I mean, that would be the one for me as well. That was really the standout fight from that card. Ige versus Bektic was a good fight. There were a couple of good fights on that card, but the clear standout was Jones versus Reyes to me.
It's really interesting. I actually disagree there. And I say that getting an unknown amount of flack backstage from everybody else because I actually, at the time, scored the fight for Jones. I watched it again. I figured it out. But seeing where I was sitting where I was sitting, I gave it 3-2 Jones. And Jose Youngs gave me the business for that. Anyway, the fight that really stood up and tall for me was James Krause doing what he did against Trevin Giles, because this is a fight that to refresh everybody's memory, Trevin Giles was to fight Antonio Arroyo at middleweight. Arroyo passed out, walking away. He hit the scale. This is, you can, if you listen to the weigh-in video, you can hear me going, "Oh my God," because I'm a loud person. Every microphone picked up my reaction. To hear, to notice that Arroyo passed out. Cut to James Krause, who's cornering fighter that for this event, takes a fight on a couple minutes' notice, gets it, and I think he beat Trevin Giles in a great, shocking performance that stuck with me more than Jones Reyes, because yes, it was the somebody finally toppled Jones performance, but to see James Krause go out there and do that in, basically his trainers, just to kind of show up and go, "Well, I guess I'm fighting this weekend." That was something for me.
Yeah. Pat, did you raise your hand? Did you make it to an event?
No, I was going to go to UFC 247, and then last minute had a little bit of a switcheroo because someone else came down. And
I guess something happened. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't, Jay. So the best fight I saw was, I think it was some dude named Max. I don't remember the other dude, at an Austin piano bar downtown live. It was good shit right before the pandemic. It was 1-2 punch for this guy Max. It was a great time. It was a solid fight.
Just shout out to the Twisted Tea guy too, by the way. If we're going to mention like non. Shout out to the Twisted Tea guy.
Twisted Tea guy is my MVP. Yeah.
MVP of the year.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I got a hollow point can of tea in the back, man. Come get this work. I went to the only event that I covered this year was Bellator 238. The main event was Cyborg and Julia Budd. I don't remember there being any particular standout fights as far as like, oh, this is back and forth, edge of your seat action. Probably the closest might have been Anthony Taylor and Chris Avila. I remember that being kind of a close fight, but there were standout performances on there. So like Sergio Pettis looked fantastic. Raymond Daniels, he did what he was supposed to do, and he spin kicked a guy that they pulled in from wherever. Cyborg did what Cyborg does. So there were standout performances, but not a lot of back and forth action that I really can remember. I mean, Archuleta and Corrales won that card, but I don't remember that. Maybe my expectations for that fight were so high that it wasn't just this all out like knock 'em out brawl, that it doesn't stand out to me right now. And maybe I have to go back and rewatch it and discover that I'm wrong and I actually was entertained, but it just didn't stand out to me at all. So I feel like we got gypped out of seeing me cage side, man. I got gypped out of that. I want to see some cage side stuff, but I did like pull a knife out on somebody the other day because I thought they were messing around with my car in the middle of the night. So that is the most back and forth excitement that I've had this year.
The best performance you've seen?
Best performance. Actually, was that after New Year's? Because that may not count for 20.
No, that was before New Year's because you told us about that last week, and this is the first show of the year.
That's right.
Oh, that happened last week? No, I think that. Oh.
Yeah, you told us about it on the show last week. So
maybe he pulled a knife on a guy.
No. Somebody broke into my car last week.
Yeah,
But I've been ultra paranoid. So then I was up playing video games, and I thought I heard somebody fiddling around my car, and then I came out there with a knife. So that's so that was new. So that was 2021. But no, oh shit. I don't know, whatever. So anyway, let's move on.
My fight of the year so far.
Me battling my memory, or battling Adonis. Jesus Christ, he's beaten me so many times this year. Now, fighter of the year, I say Davison Figueiredo. Who wants to disagree with that?
Izzy.
Hamzat Chimaev. I'm kidding.
I'm throwing out names that are maybe.
Okay. All right. All right, because that was I've seen that body lock. We considered Israel Adesanya. I've seen that as an honorable mention for a few other websites. I mean, can we make a case for Israel Adesanya? He did have perhaps the performance of a lifetime against Paulo Costa. I think one of the all-time great performances in mixed martial arts, right up there with Anderson Silva against Forrest Griffin and Conor versus Eddie Alvarez. I think that what he did to Costa is right on that level. But that fight against Yoel Romero, the last normal event, that we'll probably ever have, UFC 248, I believe it was. Just not the fight that checked the boxes as far as what you want in your fighter of the year.
Hold on. I mean, I'm gonna get some flack from Pat again. I can feel it. I can feel it. Sorry. Let's for a second table how shitty that Romero fight was, because we all agree it was a shitty fight. Okay. What we cannot disagree on, I think, is that Paulo Costa and Romero are better opponents, like pound for pound, or however you want to phrase it, than Joseph Benavidez and Alex Perez.
I'm gonna give you pushback.
I don't even have to give you flag. Yeah, I don't even have to give you flag. Go ahead.
No, because like I definitely
Benavidez. Hold on. We went on and on about how Jacare is faded. We're not going to say the same about Joseph Benavidez a little bit at all. No. We're not going to say about
there was no indication that he was faded until Figueiredo killed him twice.
It happens.
Which one is it, Matt? Is it Benavidez and Jacare are faded, or is it just Benavidez is faded and Jacare isn't faded?
Hey,
which one is it there?
Hey, It doesn't matter. I'm sticking to this right now, Pat. Okay, Romero and Paul, especially Romero, all-time status is higher ranked than Alex Perez. Joseph Benavidez, maybe we can have that argument since he was always number 2 to Demetrius Johnson. But the context of Benavidez not in his prime, the context of Romero fight being a shit fight, and even Romero having like a losing streak going into that, I feel like those are washes in a way. And then we get to Costa versus Alex Perez, and Costa blows away Alex Perez in terms of how I rank them pound for pound wise. And then we get to the Moreno fight because Figueiredo has to have one more fight than Izzy this year, and that might benefit him, but he didn't win that fight. And some people thought he lost the fight. So I will say that Figueiredo, by credit for fighting the most this year, by beating up Benavidez and Perez the way he did, I think he should get fighter of the year. But Izzy's that number 2, and I think he had a good year too. And the only other name in that mention would probably be Blachowicz for conquering 205 in John Jones' absence.
Yeah, not Kevin Holland, the guy that you stood defending, a whole bunch against Jacare for 5. He beat 5 wins in a row.
I said knockout of the year. I didn't say fighter of the year. I don't think he has his fighter of the year.
Kevin Holland has the case for fighter of the year, though.
I don't think that. I don't think he's in my top 3 fighters of the year. That's just me.
I don't think Adesanya has a leg to stand on, given he fought twice. And yes, the Costa performance was masterful. You can't take anything away from that. But the Romero fight was terrible, and he arguably lost that fight. You want to talk about how Figueiredo arguably lost?
Come on. He didn't win that.
The idea that Romero won that fight is such a weak argument. There's no way Romero won that fight.
I scored it for Romero, but me aside, because I know I could get a bunch of flack. Go look at MMA decisions. I wasn't the only one, right?
There were plenty of someone else on this show named Patrick, so you would be Patrick the Lesser.
I mean, I don't know, man.
I think there's somebody else in the show that scored the fight for Yoel Romero.
Might just be me.
Might just be me. No, it wasn't
What?
me. No, it wasn't me. It was Nick.
Oh.
Listen, I'll say this in terms of Izzy's case for fighter of the year, and why I didn't have him up there in my. I think I had him maybe right outside the top 5. If we're doing just male, if we're just doing male here, are we separating it? I need to clarify this.
Well, who else would be in the discussion for women?
I'm gonna get to it. Is this male or
just male? Anyone male fighter?
Okay, just male. Just male. Probably around 4 for me. Now listen, I didn't have him up higher because the Yoel Romero fight sucked, as we know. It seemed like Yoel didn't want to be there, right? And I had the Costa fight pegged as an easy win for him, like way out of the gate. Stylistically, I thought he was going to toy with him. I had the same inkling when Holly Holm took on Ronda Rousey. I was like, this is going to be an easy day at the office for Izzy Adesanya. And he went out there and did exactly what I pegged him to do. I was saying that for months. Go through my tweet history. It's like, this is a terrible stylistic matchup for Costa. He's going to get destroyed. And that's exactly what happened. So it knocked down the excitement of that performance for me because I expected that to happen.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, I also was very high on Adesanya's chances against Costa. I know that was we talked about that quite a few times. Like, I thought Costa was going to go out there and get washed, but I think it speaks more to my thoughts about Costa in general. I don't think he's nearly as high level as his ranking would indicate. So if we're talking about strength of schedule, I think Figueiredo wins that. I think much higher about Alex Perez as a mixed martial artist than I do about Paulo Costa. Yeah.
Matt is mind blown right now.
Dude, wait, hold on.
Paulo Costa is unproven.
What?
Unproven.
No,
at that high level.
And we were in the event where he and Romero went to war. And you're saying that he's unproven?
I'm saying Costa. I agree with that too. Yeah. I think Romero won the fight, but if I remember correctly, I think Romero won the fight. But anyway, Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero were just the perfect style matchup to create that level of chaos. That's what we saw. We saw the product of two chaotic, manic individuals running into each other as fast as they possibly could. We saw like a football game essentially in that fight. We didn't see a exhibition of precision and skill the way Israel Adesanya performed.
Alex Perez, I think in almost all of his losses, I think it's like one or two of his losses are not via first round finish. He's been finished in almost all of his losses in the first round. Okay. Yeah. This is a guy that has lost to top 5 opponents, top 10 opponents already before he fought Figueiredo. Costa was undefeated, had beat top 5, top 10 opponents on the way to Izzy. Really? Ant?
Okay. Before the Romero win, you're talking about Johnny Hendricks and Uriah Hall when Uriah Hall
has
one
win against a top 10 opponent off of what, 15 fights?
13.
Okay, that's even less. That's even more impressive, actually. So yeah, I don't see the issue here. I don't see how we can discredit Costa or discredit Izzy's title defense there. That makes no sense to me. If we want to discredit the Romero fight because it was shit, I get that. I don't think it's valid, but like I totally get that as a fan, as a consumer of the sport. Like why you'd be like, I don't really count that in fighter of the year discussion because it was a shit fight. But he torched the best contender, the number one guy we wanted to face. Okay. And that guy was on a tear up until that point. I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous.
Does it help Figueiredo's argument that he killed Joe Benavidez twice?
It does.
I mean, this is a guy who's like 9-1 in his last 10.
Absolutely does help. Figueiredo should be fighter of the year. Absolutely. But to discredit Izzy in any way for those two fights just doesn't make sense to me. Other than the Romero fight sucked. That's a valid.
I'm not trying to discredit Izzy because he fought Romero the way he probably had to, considering the type of opponent Yoel decided to be that evening. So he did what he had to do to retain the belt and get the W. So I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at him fighting Costa. They had a natural feud with one another apparently, and this brewed over years. And the opportunity was presented to him. Costa should have gotten the title shot before Romero anyway. So there it was. But I still think Costa snuck in through that title shot, not having proved himself ready for championship level mixed martial arts. I think what Israel did to him demonstrated that perfectly.
And I also don't want to discredit Izzy's performance of actually going out there and actually doing it. But in terms of fighter of the year consideration, where it's like a fighter that kind of surprised you a little bit, Like it's the same reason I don't have Valentina Shevchenko high on my list this year.
Yes.
Right? She just went out there and did like she handled business.
Yeah.
Like everybody expected her to win, she won. But there's like no really surprising moments there, and
She was
that's
a 10
just
to 1
like
favorite every time.
Yeah.
And when it comes to somebody winning the belt via knockout against an undefeated contender, that I don't know how you don't put Jan Blachowicz up there when he knocked out the dude that most of us thought beat John Jones.
He was number 3. He was number 3 on my list.
I think he's better than Adesanya based on
Me
your
too.
own logic. I mean,
Me too.
Reyes is a better contender than Costa is on paper, bar like hands down. And he knocked out Corey Anderson before, so I don't know how.
I feel like we're discrediting Romero as a result as well in some fashion. And I remember us vividly, us, everyone was like yelling at Romero to go up to 205 and face John Jones because we didn't want John Jones to face Reyes and Blachowicz. We didn't want to face the no names at 205. We wanted to face Romero at relatively recent point in history. Again, these are hairs of separation here. I put Blachowicz in my 3rd spot. I don't see why I need to counter that in any fashion.
You do because I say so.
And I don't want to. I want to be clear here on my thoughts of Yoel Romero. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but he's kind of like in the Jacare stage for me right now.
Oh yeah,
not just because of ability, like diminished ability, so to speak, but diminished motivation inside the cage. It seems because it's like he goes out there and he's just like fucking around a lot. Like, dude, like I have a feeling like Yoel could have finished fights if he actually just stopped fucking around and just like tried. But it seems like he's just out there, you know, sticking his tongue out like while guys are swinging at him and shit. Like, how about just focus and land a counterpunch? Try doing that. Like, so that kind of knocks him down a peg in terms of, you know, the level of competition. Because I mean, yeah, he's still got the physical tools there, but it's like he's not using them. It's weird.
To be fair, though, Romero's always been like that guy who goofs off and he waits till the 3rd round to knock out people. Like in the Chris Weidman fight where like they didn't do anything for 2.5 rounds. All of a sudden, Romero's like, I'm done with this fight. You know, flying knee, you're out. You're done. You have a dented face for the rest of your life. You know, like Romero does that to degree. I do think you're right, though, that he is clearly on the back end of his career, the last chapter of his career, however you want to phrase it. But he still is a top 5 guy in the division when Costa beat him. You know, he was still a valid contender in the middleweight contendership and sort of the mix, right? When Costa beat him. I know some of you don't agree that he beat him, but he did. He has a W in the resume.
I actually need to look on MMA decisions to see what I don't know if I submitted a score. I imagine I did since I was cage side, but I don't even remember how I scored that fight. I just jumped on the argument that best suited my needs at the time. So let's move on, and we're going to now go to the speed bag, and this is when I get to flex more authority on you mofos. So this will be fun with everyone on the panel. So you guys are going to have 10 seconds to answer each question. We're going to keep this a round robin, so pay attention for your name. Remember, Hunter and Wells, your roles have switched. Hunter, you are now the greater. Wells, you are now the lesser. So now we're going to start with you, Lesser. Your question: is Israel Adesanya making a mistake going up to 205 pounds? There it is.
No, sorry. I was muted. No.
All right, let me start that over because give Pat his full 10 seconds. Pat.
Yes, he is. It's risky business wise. He should just take all the money. He should just stay at middleweight, take all the money.
Yeah, I think this is a bad move. Nothing but tough fights for him at 205, and he's not even going to defend the belt. So just stay at 185.
Nick.
It's a good move because you're gonna beat Blachowicz and being champ. I mean, how can you complain about that? Easy money for him, and yeah, good move.
And Matt, the greater.
In lieu of a real contender at 185, why not go beat champ and entice John Jones for the real money fight that only matters for you?
And Ben.
Yeah, it's not a mistake. However, it turns out it's a calculated risk. I like the risk, and for once, I'm excited to see what he does in this next fight.
All right, good answers right there. So, fellas, I'm going to start with you on this one, Pat. Would Amanda Nunes put Jake Paul in a coma? Why are we even talking about this right now? You have 10 seconds.
I don't know why we're talking about this, but no, I don't think she would. I think she'd beat him. I think she'd probably knock him out, but he's got like what 40 pounds on her. No, I think she wins.
Jay,
Man, if that Shibatar other fight Hiroya is any indication, probably not. She get armbarred.
Nick.
No, but that concussion would suck.
All right, and Greater.
Basically fuck Dana White for putting out this hypothetical on some sexist bullshit. So yeah.
All right. Now we're gonna actually ask the real Matt the Greater.
Blasphemy over there, I heard. She's gonna win if they were ever to fight. They're never gonna fight, and it shouldn't happen.
All right, and Ben.
Are we talking about this shit again? This is the same thing that like was a couple years ago when Ronda Rousey said she could armbar Cain Velasquez if she started in the right position. No, if she started in the right position, he would stand up and throw her across the room.
Hey,
like what the fuck are we even talking?
Hey, she can box Floyd Mayweather, okay?
She certainly could box Floyd Mayweather.
She would lose, but she could.
Yes.
All right.
I mean,
Jay.
Floyd Mayweather out wrestled Conor McGregor. Who's to say that like he might not even take her in a mixed martial arts fight?
That's all right. That was actually said on the show. Jay,
that's the cops coming for you, Ben. That's what that is.
Comment police are on you, buddy.
All right, Jay, you're going to start off the last question. Conor or Poirier, who do you think wins the rematch?
I think Poirier has grown a lot more since their first fight relative to McGregor. I think Poirier dusts him in like the third round.
All right. And Pat?
I thought you were going the other way. Conor knocks him out. Sorry. I hate it, but that's what's going to happen.
I thought I'd switch it up. And Lesser.
You fucking asshole.
Ben.
Dude, like Poirier is so much better than he was a few years ago, but he's still so hittable. Like that's the one thing he's never fixed.
Greater.
Let's be honest here. Poirier has improved, but man, he is, like Ben said, super hittable. His defense is leaky. McGregor wins.
All right, Nick.
Yeah, I got McGregor. Poirier's improved more, but it still won't be enough. McGregor, knockout or decision.
All right.
Well, you're going to say submission.
I was like, oh, shit. We're really mixing things up here. All right. Now I'm going to change the clock to give myself 30 seconds to answer all three questions. I will answer them in succession. The clock will begin after reading the first question. So, is Israel Adesanya making a mistake moving up to 205? Absolutely not. This is the move to make. He presumably can beat Jan Blachowicz, get an extra belt, get some extra money for his next fight, lure out John Jones, and 185 ain't doing nothing exciting for him right now. Anyway, Amanda Nunes putting Jake Paul in the coma, no. He's still a much bigger man and actually knows how to box, so that might give her some trouble. Conor McGregor and Poirier, I'm going to say Conor wins, but it's going to be closer than it was the first time. There we go. So I decided to take the mature route to answer these questions because I'm a very mature man. So now, which one of the champions, the current UFC champions, do you think holds on to their belt through 2021? I'll say Israel Adesanya will be the first person I say keeps the middleweight belt.
Usman.
Will he defend it?
Will he defend it? Yeah, I think he'll defend it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's someone who doesn't have any problem with a frequent schedule. So I think once a clear contender is established, had Cannonier beat Whitaker, I think that's the fight we'd be talking about now. But no point in him fighting Whitaker so close to the first time he did with that little bit of sample size to see what Whitaker looks like now in between. So
yeah, Kamaru Usman, just gonna point that out. He's not giving up that belt anytime soon.
A lot of people looking at Burns as a potential upset candidate here.
Stop.
Anybody want to stand on the table and and scream that Burns might pull it off?
No. I've got Usman big time in that one. And it's going to be the most Kamaru Usman win ever.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seeing Burns' defensive guard when he really is on have to put it on full display, because Woodley didn't challenge him on the ground. It wasn't like that. I mean, Burns, first 2 rounds, Burns could really surprise us, but I think it goes further. I'm going to be an oddball here, and I'm going to say that I think Khabib will still be the lightweight champion at the end of 2021, and I don't know why, because just sometimes these things happen in MMA, seriously. But my untitled 2021 thing, I don't think Shevchenko will be the flyweight champion at the end of the year next year. Yep.
You think she's going to move up?
I think she's going to lose.
Oh, to Andrade?
The Entourage. I just think that she looked complacent when she fought Jennifer Maia. That one round, she lost the round and she won the rest of them, dominant fashion. But that one round stood out to me as a moment of a she's vulnerable. Duffy disagrees so much his mouth wants to explode. I think that Shevchenko is going to lose before the year's out.
Duffy is like calling Adult Protective Services right now to send people over to your house for a welfare check. Like, I'm calling your local fire department and saying there's a gas leak in your house. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you, man. Wow.
But
Lauren Murphy.
I mean,
the job.
Oh my goodness! Don't light a match in your house right now, Jay.
Hey, Pat, duck.
All right, now, Jay. Now, one thing. No. So you know what, Jay? You might be right about Khabib being champion throughout 2021, because the way Dana is trying to force him to not retire, he doesn't have to fight to keep his belt. So
exactly, he doesn't have to fight the whole year.
Yeah,
Dana will leave him as champion just to entice that Conor matchup again.
Yeah. So
do you know how fast the UFC stripped Henry Cejudo when he retired? Like a half hour later. Yeah. Like the dude, I don't even know if the guy was allowed to leave the press area with his belts at the end of that night.
Yeah, like GSP talked about taking a sabbatical, and they didn't even give him a belt to enter the press conference with.
Didn't they give him Conor
after the fight? So they had to like jack a belt from someone else or whatever to give him. So good point there. Any other champions that we want to make a case for maintains their status through 2021?
I think Figueiredo. I don't see anybody at 125 aside from Kyoji, I guess, but I don't think Horiguchi is probably ever going to fight in the UFC again. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure someone, Askarov, might get that shot, but I don't know. I think Figueiredo was probably one step ahead of everybody.
I know we didn't mention these names, but Volkanovski and Petr Yan could hold on to the belts. They are in deep divisions too. Yeah. We can see them losing, but they are competent enough where I could still see them holding on by the end of the year. That's not out of the question. Stipe though, Jan Blachowicz, I don't think so. That seems unlikely at this point.
And then it's funny that there are two men that we perpetually underrate, that always get the short end on the stick when it comes to matchmaking. Not matchmaking, but just predictions and who we think is going to win. So it's very interesting.
Those two guys are facing the best opponents out of the bunch, though. Like, they're facing John Jones, most likely, respectively, and Izzy Adesanya. Like, we're talking about pound for pound level fighters, while Kamaru Usman's fighting Gilbert Burns. Like, it's just, there's a different level here. Or Shevchenko is still fighting whoever she's fighting. It's apples and oranges in terms of competition level.
I will say,
did I miss the disclaimer that said you cannot choose Amanda Nunes here?
No, I have a question. I have a question about that. Will Amanda Nunes be a 2-division champion at the end of next year?
Yes.
Do you think they'll allow her to keep both belts?
Yeah, because there's no reason to get rid of featherweight. Everyone keeps predicting every year women's featherweight will be gone. But why? Like, it's not taking a spot of anything. There's no good in getting rid of it.
And all but 2 of them can fight at 135 if they have to.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's keeping fighters on the shelf either.
No. And why? I mean, they can call Amanda Nunes a 2-division champion. That's a good marketing tool. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's still something. Might as well keep that if you can.
Although I will say, I'm not. Well, so I got 2 things real quick. One, for Nunes, I could see her retiring at the end of the year. And if that's the case, then maybe they get rid of featherweight just because I think they're keeping it for her. But I will stand on a soapbox alone and say I think Stipe is going to be champion by the end of the year. I think as after the way Reyes boxed up Jones, I think Stipe's boxing is better, and I think he's the bigger guy and can hold on to that belt.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to start, even thinking about the X's and O's possibilities of Jones versus Stipe just yet. Like when that matchup is, if and when that matchup is announced, then I'll let my brain get there. But right now, it just is a video game fantasy. I'll play it on UFC 4 and let my level of skill determine who wins. Because pretty nice.
Also, remember, there's a lot of rumors swirling about Stipe versus Ngannou first in March, so it's possible that we don't even see Stipe Jones if he does lose. It could be Ngannou versus Jones. So
right, which Ngannou versus Jones that sounds like such a fever dream of fun. I'd love to see that. But yeah, it's definitely some good discussion there. Now we did have something prepared about whether Khabib would fight again in 2021. I think we touched on that already. I don't think he does. I think this retirement sticks, and I believe if anything, maybe Khabib uses the lure of getting him back in the cage as a way to get his newly acquired promotion some traction with UFC Fight Pass or something like that. I think maybe he parlays this into something else. But unless Mom gives the go, he's not fighting. I'd like it to stay that way. Anyone want to disagree? You think Khabib's coming back in 2021?
Yep. I think the allure is too great. The money's too good. Dana, I mean, we can dump on Dana all we want. He can negotiate like the best of them. I could easily see him coming to the table with a dollar amount that even Khabib's family goes, I could change my entire town with that kind of money. I mean, this
laughing in Fedor. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Fedor retired. GSP retired. Think of all the names that have hung up their gloves. How many Randy Couture retired in the middle of his career and then came back and did all the things he did. So I don't believe it. If names as hallowed as Fedor and GSP, who we trust them at their word, unless they're talking about aliens or dinosaurs, we trust them implicitly and believe everything they have to say. I mean, if Fedor can come back, I think Khabib can come back. And I think Khabib will fight before the end of the year. He doesn't have to. And he whether he fights or not, he will still be the champion at the end of 2021, I believe.
I disagree with both of those, but I think the only way he comes back is GSP. I think he's proven time and time again it's not about money. He's already fought McGregor, and he said multiple times he doesn't want to do it. You know, if you want to, you got to get the mother okay first off, but then I think it has to be GSP. And even GSP, when he retired, says I'm going to step away from the sport for a while, and then he never said like, "Hey, I'm done forever," right? So I could see Khabib coming back, but it'd have to be against GSP, and I don't see GSP in the UFC getting a deal done, and him coming back for that fight now. So I think it's unlikely. In terms of keeping the belt, it's too much of a business risk and too much of a, it makes way more sense if Khabib says, "Hey, I'm not coming back in, the first half of the year," for them to slap the belt on somebody like Conor if he wins, or, even Chandler, if there's some crazy Conor Chandler fight, if Chandler gets past Hooker. It makes way too much sense from a business perspective to have the belt sit on the shelf for an entire year just to try and get Khabib to come out. I think they'll have a conversation early on in the year. If they can't get an agreement or something set for later that year, I think they will put the belt on somebody else by March or June, I'd say.
If Conor wins, right, and beats Poirier, what's to stop the UFC just giving an interim belt, and then it doesn't matter whether it's interim or real or not? It's Conor McGregor, and you just need a title fight at the top of these pay-per-views because ESPN really wants that. There you go. ESPN's happy. Now UFC's happy. Conor's happy. And it's up for discussion on who is the undisputed champion at lightweight in terms of the casual fans. So I do agree with you in a sense that the UFC will give someone a belt eventually, but they could easily just give someone an interim belt.
But interims work differently in most contracts, and I'm assuming that Conor's contract is very special. And
Sure.
I would imagine that it's one of those things where when you fight and you get the interim belt, you get that big payday. That's what everybody's been talking about. Yes, interim belt, let me get an interim belt fight to get the payday. But in terms of defense, I'm pretty sure there's language in there that makes it different. So I would imagine they would have to promote him up to full lightweight, otherwise he'd be pissed. But I don't know. That's murky, but from what I know of contracts.
But at the same time,
oh no, that's it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, but you know, Conor also got the exception to the rule as far as the title being at the top of the pay-per-view, what he did against Cerrone. So like the rules don't apply to him. If there's any sort of leeway that can be done, Conor will get that. So I think we can rule out a contractual issue stopping the UFC from slapping an interim, especially as far as affecting pay. I think pay will be the last thing that Conor's going to be affected by if an interim title is slapped on him as opposed to an undisputed one.
The last thing I'll say about that, though, is they would have to renegotiate the contract. It's possible they could do the interim and then they renegotiate and it works out. But if you look at every one of Conor's fights, I think I want to say his past 4 or 5 fights, there's always been some, oh yeah, we renegotiated the contract. Yeah, we redid this part. I can't imagine, especially Mr. Proper Whiskey, I want stock in the company. If there's anything barring him from getting full money on because of the interim versus the full lightweight championship, they're going to either have to renegotiate or promote him. But it's possible if they renegotiate and they give him some pass. That I could see.
Yeah. I have a quick question for Pat and open up to anyone else because you mentioned GSP as a name that could bring Khabib back, and I wholeheartedly agree that GSP is a name that could bring Khabib back, regardless of the money involved, even though the money would be significant, just because it's a massive legacy fight when the Conor rematch isn't a legacy fight in the same way in Khabib's mind, and I think all of our minds. But you mentioned that something to the effect that the UFC-GSP relationship will, in effect, not allow that fight to happen. I'm assuming you and others are under the assumption that GSP and the UFC are in such a relationship or non-relationship that they will never negotiate for another fight again. Is that kind of the assumption in the MMA community that GSP and the UFC are never going to work together again? That can never happen. The bridges have been burned there, or
I don't think they're completely burned.
No,
like the bridges are never completely burned with somebody who can make them that much money.
Right, but it gets progressively harder with the deals that are in place, because when you look at like Venom, right, and GSP having the Under Armour sponsorship, and then you look at the ESPN deal, which has different, that's why Brock didn't come back. It's you have the minimum threshold that you have to meet, and then you start getting pay-per-view points, and Brock wanted a guarantee to offset the numbers based on the fact that you're going to get less money behind ESPN Plus. Even if you do 1.3 million buys like Conor versus Cerrone did in a non-ESPN Plus world, that probably does a lot more. That's the thing. So I think that as every day that goes by, it's harder to get GSP and Dana to the table because of their own contractual issues, because GSP also just came out with a Bud Light sponsorship, right? Like the more that happens, the more things get messy and it gets harder to figure it all out.
But the Bud Light thing
is so basic.
But the Bud Light thing, which actually it's a basic beer, like that's trash. GSP drink better beer than that. But Bud Light and Bud and Modelo are owned by the same company, which is why there was that smooth transition between one beer sponsor to another. So dealing with it with the same team, so I don't see that being the hurdle necessarily.
Yes,
yeah.
Like
the Under Armour thing was.
Well, but I'll say just like how Endeavor owns the UFC and several other different.
GSP.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it it would be possible, but you're still looking at internal fighting. I mean, you had Adidas and Reebok is a great example of that. The, chaos that they've had and the internal things that are completely outside of the UFC where they're just a giant mess and Adidas is looking at spinning off Reebok and being done with them. It's this type of stuff you still have to negotiate internally because that's still someone's marketing team and somebody owns that part of the product and somebody owns that stream, and there's a CEO of Modelo's product line or a product manager that then has to fight with Bud Light. It's easier because they're owned by a parent company, but it still causes more strife.
All right. Well, I feel tremendously outgunned talking about business things with Pat. So I'm going to move on before I get embarrassed on my own channel here. Now we're going to conclude things with a very simple question here. Who are you rooting for? Daniel or Johnny? You Cobra Kai fans out there, Daniel Larusso or Johnny Lawrence? Who's right? Who's wrong here?
I've not watched a single episode of Cobra Kai.
And
Thank
just
you for
like that,
giving me my
you
greater
become
status back.
exactly Matt the Greater. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes, I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and answer the question as well. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
For giving me the floor. I'm rocking with Larusso, man. I mean, I'm keeping it old school. I like the Cobra Kai, the angle that they've gone with this time around. You kind of sympathize with the other side, but I can't get down with Cobra Kai, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Cool merchandise, but not a good bunch there.
Man, I think the way the writing has been in this show, which I won't give away any spoilers or major plot points for those of you that need to watch it. Now that it's on Netflix, you don't have an excuse anymore. You don't have to do the YouTube Red or whatever the hell it was called, that subscription thing. The way they've written these characters up and made it so it's more than just a sympathetic character and it's now a protagonist, almost antagonist situation. Cobra Kai is a different light for me. I was never of the full mind of Daniel LaRusso, the hero, the righteous one. I always had it wasn't quite like Neil Patrick Harris in How I Met Your Mother, where it was that level of Team Cobra Kai, but I sympathized with my karate background. I appreciated that kind of dojo style to an extent. I had a sensei that may or may not have beaten the tar out of me when I was younger. So I can feel it and I can appreciate the tough love aspect of Cobra Kai. Give me Team Johnny.
Any other Team Cobra Kai people sitting here?
I'm sorry, the team that is spearheaded by like the alcoholic fuck up who's like doing his best to make good out of his life in a very modest way in its third act. Yeah, Team Cobra Kai all the way right here.
You know what? I'm gonna say that I can't say I'm Team Cobra Kai. I'm not necessarily rooting against Daniel or Johnny thing. I think the problem is Kreese. Kreese is the problem. This is the guy. This is the root of all evil. In the multiverse of Karate Kid. Just waiting for our Hillary Swank and Jaden Smith to pop up and make,
they're going to come in future
seasons. Oh,
seasons.
Hillary Swank is coming through, and
100%.
It's probably going to be the worst episode.
Like, spoil this for me. They don't bring back stupid ponytail Terry Silver at any point, do they?
I can't comment.
No, you know what? I heard that actor didn't. He refused to come back.
I can't talk about what I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb here and just say that I'm with Matt that I have not watched the series because I have a good reason. I've been checking out this really awesome show called Ozark. That's just really engrossing.
I know other people named Patrick. If it comes to that,
yeah. What's Pat Wyman doing? I'm gonna hit him.
Yeah.
You discussed.
You guys should watch Ozark. That's all I'm saying.
You know what? Just for that, you've lost some initials.
I mean, I've never seen.
I got plenty extra.
I've never seen Cobra Kai. I've never seen Ozark. Never seen Karate Kid. So I'll flip a coin and say Daniel, but I got nothing to offer.
Have you seen the remake? Have you seen the Jaden Smith remake?
No,
that should have been called the Kung Fu Kid, but still.
No, I haven't.
You know that Nick has a constant running Twitter thread where like we have to tell him what movies to watch.
Yeah,
I watched Rocky for the first time like 2 weeks ago.
Didn't you just watch The Matrix like yesterday or something?
He only got old enough to watch R-rated movies like 3 weeks ago. He had a backlog.
Oh man. Well, I think that's a good enough place to end this, because we're clearly going off the rails here, as we tend to do when more than a few of us get together. So, want to thank Matt the Greater, Matt the Lesser, Pat the Lesser, and Nick Baldwin, who just doesn't know any better because he's too young. But we'll get him up to speed. So you gotta check out all these gentlemen's work. I mean, it's enough of us to where you can go to almost any outlet and you'll find one of our names somewhere. But we are represented on SureDog.com, MMA On Point, The Score, The Body Lock.
My MMA.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, Mixed Combat Radio, of course. Like, that's Mixed Combat Radio, and The Score. Did I leave anybody out? Anything out there? Any other outlets that weren't mentioned?
Current or former outlets?
Just current.
Oh, okay, just current then. Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's current. Although MMA Decision still credits me at SureDog, although I haven't been there for over a year now. So
I did look it up while we were doing this for the Romero Costa fight.
I did too. It's close. It's close. It is.
No. But I'm talking about Ant's specific score is not listed. You didn't score it.
Oh, because I didn't submit it to MMA Decisions. I tweeted it cage side, but I wasn't an official score for SureDog that night. So I'll have to go back through my Twitter and see what I said. But I'm not going to go back through my Twitter because.
May I interject and talk about something about MMA Decisions real quick? That there was another scorer in this show right here that scored the fight for Romero when he fought Adesanya, and it was a certain B. Duffy.
I scored it for Romero.
Yeah, I gave 2 rounds, which is why they didn't record mine, because it was just that bad of a fight. I scored at 49-48, so that's how you know how good a fight it was.
Wow. I think the only person I'm not done with on this panel is Jay. So Jay is still my friend. Yeah. I mean, come on, Matt. You did the Cobra Kai thing.
I'm sorry.
You're canceled. You're canceled.
I know.
All right, fellas. So this has been a great time. Of course, I know when 2021 is over, we'll do this all again. Probably be the same cast of characters. And of course, when big fights come around, we might put the summit back together. And maybe another Mixed Combat Radio reunion for a big card might be a good time as well. But anyway, so check out all of our work. Remember, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. Big thanks to both the Matts, to Pat, to Nick, to Ben and Jay, as always, every week holding it down with me here on the Walkout Network. So you know what you got to do. Stay beautiful, stay positive, and definitely stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.